Good evening, 49er faithful, and welcome to another episode of Between Two Beards. I'm Rob Schuh. That's Randon McMahon. We are here to walk you through on up to the 49ers preseason game tomorrow. Catch you up what's going on in the offseason. What's going to be interesting for the game tomorrow. Randon, welcome back. How have you been? How was the A's game when you were off last week? Give us some details.
Well, it was the A's game a couple months ago, but last week I was in Miami, man.
Ooh, Miami. I forgot. Okay.
Yeah, I was on the baseball road trip. Yeah, I knocked out stadiums 25 and 26 out of my 30 stadiums. So, Tampa Bay and Miami. Great time.
Man.
A little sunburn. I'm like, you can't see it this close, but I'm shedding up here from the sunburn that I had on my head, being on the beach and stuff. But man, it was good. Miami Stadium, very underrated stadium. Like, they don't have a phenomenal fan base or tradition or whatever outside those 2 World Series rings, but that stadium was top notch. Enjoyed it. I held a baby alligator, went airboating through the Everglades. Man, it was a pretty sweet effing trip, man. It was pretty good.
That is an epic trip. How was holding a baby alligator? Was that a trip? Like, were they sort of holding it with you, or were you cradling that thing all by yourself? Like, what was that like?
It was all by yourself. I mean, they had the rubber bands around the snout, and,
right. So it doesn't take one of your fingers with it.
It was 2 feet long, and you're holding it by the tail and then right under the breastplate. And they tried to get my brother to kiss a baby alligator without the face mask on.
That seems risky.
So like the trainer was like, I guess they have a lot of nerve endings in their nose. So like he's rubbing the nose to get the alligator to calm down. Like, it's like euphoric for them. Yeah. And he goes, all you have to do is do this, rub the nose. And the alligator like turns around and bites the guy's finger. And my brother's like, no, I'm not kissing that thing.
Yeah, I'm good.
My brother was so game. And he was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that now. Yeah.
I'm going to pass on that. Don't want to get bit on the snout by a baby alligator. That seems like one of those videos that you definitely find on YouTube. A great idea. Hey, I'm just going to kiss the baby alligator. No, bad idea. Ends very poorly in many circumstances. Well, we're glad to have you back. The chat is here and lively. Appreciate all of you. If you're here early, smash that like button for Randon and I. We got Dustin Kohler in here talking about 7 days. It's almost here. I believe he's referencing the cut down to the 53-man roster and potentially the end of Jimmy Garoppolo's tenure with the 49ers. Raphael 5629er sneakerhead on the channel comes in to say, what's up, Rob, Randon, and everyone. We have an interesting observation. Kurt here coming in to say, Rob, Malik Turner, Jordan Mason, and Quantrez Knight seem to be some of the last players on the bubble for the roster. A 6th wide receiver, 5th running back, or 9th defensive back. We are going to be talking about the running back room in just another moment. So let's go ahead and get into that. Want to say what's up to Gold Blooded, Kurt, Tom Bragg, John B, Quesadilla, Thrilla, Dirk Pippen, and Rick Diaz here in the chat. If you've got a topic that you want Randon and I to cover, put it in there with the @Rob so that I know that you're talking to us. We'd be happy to get to those topics. But we're going to kick this thing off talking about that running back room. When you look at this group, it seems like a very tough room to suss out, right? It's hard to pick who's a lock. It's maybe not hard to pick who's a lock. It's hard to pick who's on the bubble, who's going to make it, who gets cut, and who might get claimed if they are waived. So let's roll through all of those. Randon, who do you view as an absolute lock on this roster to make the 49ers?
Eli Mitchell.
Running back specific, sorry.
That's it. Like, it just seems like there's a lot of, no offense or like whatever, like, it just seems like a lot of like, okay, let's race to be the best of the middle of the ground running backs. Like, there's a lot of not excellence going on here. Like, and everybody will say Jordan Mason and whatever, he's going against guys that are going to be bagging groceries in a couple of weeks. So like, it just, no offense to those guys. I mean, I've never played professional sports, so, I'm making a joke, but he's not going against the cream of the crop. But it just seems like there's a lot of running backs that don't want to snap this opportunity. He's the only one, but then his opportunity is against lesser talented people. So it just jumbles us all up in a thing. And outside of Eli Mitchell, I think he's the only lock on the team. That and Ty Davis Price, because they just recently spent a 3rd round pick on him. But outside of that, I really don't think there's much locks. I mean, you could go any sort of way. I think Wilson Jr. is a good bet to stay on the roster just because of the time he spent in earning trust with Shanahan. Shanahan's big on trust. But then again, like, Jordan Mason runs a lot, or Mason runs a lot like Wilson Jr. So do they believe enough in Mason? Hey, that's Wilson Jr. reincarnated, and we could just, cut the older guy? Like, it really just depends on how they feel. What do you feel about this?
This one is wild to me. As far as locks go, I think that we're in pretty close alignment. Elijah Mitchell, definitely a lock. No question about it. Tyrion Davis-Price, given the draft capital just spent on him, feels like a 100% lock. After that, I go by a series of question marks as my system for whether they're a lock or not, and everyone remaining has at least one question mark on there. But to me, the back that surprisingly feels closest to the lock of the remaining four between Jeff Wilson Jr., Trey Sermon, Jordan Mason, and JaMychal Hasty feels like Jeff Wilson Jr. And it's similar logic that you're applying there, Randon, that he has earned the trust of Kyle Shanahan. When I hear Shanahan speak about Jeff Wilson Jr., he's doing, in my mind, one of two things. He's either speaking glowingly about someone he intends to be on this roster, or he's attempting to describe the characteristics he likes about Wilson, such that the other running backs can see, oh, this is why Kyle Shanahan is so drawn to Jeff Wilson Jr., right? So I lean towards it being genuine praise that Jeff Wilson Jr. looks better than he did last year, that Shanahan thought he gutted it through injury in the 2021 season. And that's a value to him. He loves to see guys tough it out. And so even though this feels like one of the people a couple weeks ago I had on the bubble, I think Jeff Wilson Jr. is close to that lock. So that leads us into that topic of, who do you view as being legitimately on the bubble? Is everyone else on the bubble in your book, or do you differentiate between players being on the bubble and those you think the 49ers should cut?
I don't think there's any differentiation. And for me, also being a big fantasy football player, you want the backup or third string running back in Shanahan's system because somebody's going to get injured. Somebody's going to blossom. And everybody's like, oh, TDP or Sermon or whoever. But it's like, am I drafting Jeff Wilson in the last round just for shits and gigs? Like just to throw a dart out there because he trusts the dude, right? And man, it's just so crazy how you could think about this kind of stuff. And I'm just going to get to it this way. Like, there's so many people on Twitter like, oh, we got to keep 5 running backs. We got to do this. Like, Mason's a lock for the team. Every single team is going through this right now. Every single team has excess players that they're cutting down, right? They're going from 80 to 53. That's a lot of talent being cut. And just like it is in hockey, that I'm fond of, every sport thinks that, hey, this player is going to get sniped up, we should keep him. This player is going to get sniped up, we're going to keep him. And every other team has the same exact player. If Jordan Mason was so excellent, he would have been drafted, right? I mean, if players thought so fondly of him, he would have been drafted. Yeah, he might have been proving a lot of people wrong. He might get picked up, so to speak. But there's a big chance that he gets put on the practice squad and lets him earn his spot. And then you are allowed to see if Sermon is just string together some bad preseason games and he has a chance to shake it out. You get a chance to see if Jeff Wilson is the real deal. You get a chance to see if TDP can be minor beast mode, as some people have said. So it's just really interesting to see where the cuts come from. And I just, knowing businesses like you do, knowing how sports teams like you do, most of the time equity put into a player trumps what they've done in the preseason. I ultimately think either Mason or Hasty end up with the X.
That's fair. And possible that both of them do as well, right? It's entirely possible that the Niners just carry 4 running backs and juice on that roster. Entirely possible that both Mason and Hasty end up getting the axe. Where I think it's so important to point out that you call out here, Randon, is that idea that every team has their player that they're like, oh my God, we can't afford to cut this guy because somebody else is going to run in here and swoop him up. Every team in the NFL has that end of the roster player that they're hoping they can stash on the practice squad. And so it is less seldom than we tend to think that players get sniped from your team. I mean, look back at a player like Corey Sheets for the Niners, right? Who continued to light up those preseason games and never was able to actually do anything during the regular season. And every offseason has that one star that looks like they're going to shine during the regular season, and they don't even make a 53-man roster at the end of it. Is Jordan Mason going to be one of those players? That remains to be seen. Certainly, he's going up against lesser competition than the other backs are who are going earlier in the game. John B. pointing this out, and this is solid logic for looking at who's going to make this roster. John B., sneakerhead here on the channel, says, Rob, Jeff Wilson Jr. is getting the start tomorrow. Not looking good for Trey Sermon's chances to stay on the roster, if Mason plays well again. Dirk Pippen coming in to say, cut Sermon. That is a common trend coming in, is talking about last year's third-round draft pick, Trey Sermon, and the opportunity he seems to be squandering. Do you think that his draft stock will be enough to hold a roster spot for him, or is he one of those players that does need to perform well in tomorrow's game?
I think he does need to perform well. I mean, I also think if he would have caught that pass, that Texas route over the center of the field in the last game, people wouldn't be squawking at all this kind of stuff, right? Like it's
possible.
2 catches for what? He would have probably had 15 yards total between his 2 pass catches. If that one came in, people probably wouldn't be speaking about this stuff. You know, John B in the chat, if Kittle was so good or falling to the 5th, like this is their first year. Like the draft, all these scouts and everything like that, all the work that they put in the entire season isn't going to be culminated by a couple preseason games against backups. Like it's not going to be that way. Tom Brady wasn't Tom Brady in the first preseason. Neither was George Kittle. So like it's something along those lines to where any other team that's scouting the people that have been let go, sure, they could have loved Jordan Mason, but if they loved him so much, they would have picked him in the draft. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like it's easier for the running back position because all teams are going to keep 4, right? The quarterback position, like we're going to talk about later, you're keeping 2, maybe 3. So like it's less likely. So yeah, he could get sniped, but ultimately I think that there's all these guys on other teams that are also on the bubble that players like, or the scouts have liked in those organizations that they've beaten the drums for. And there's chances are that these teams are going to fall through and they're both going to be on the practice squad. I remember last year for the LA Kings, this guy was a 2nd-round pick, dynamic defenseman. Everybody said, don't pass him through waivers. Never got picked up both years in a row. Because it just is like these guys, if they get picked up, they have to be on the 53. They have to be thought of guys that are going to be able to provide talent right away on your roster with no training camp to be successful.
And if they're veterans, that salary becomes guaranteed as soon as they hit week 1 there. So yeah, it definitely is something that, you know, teams poaching guys, they really have to see something special there. I look at this when I think about who the Niners should cut. I'm just going to bring in Quesadilla Thrilla's comment here to say you need 2 change of pace guys like Mason and Hasty. I view Hasty as a little bit of an outlier there. And that's why I wonder if I view him as someone the 49ers should cut when I look at pure talent, when I'm ranking talent. But when I'm building a roster and I take this into account, this idea of needing to have the change of pace guy, the third down back, that's how a guy like Hasty can earn his way onto this roster, where it doesn't feel like talent-wise, if I'm comparing them as just talented runners, I'm not putting him above Jordan Mason coming in here. But if I'm assembling a roster together and I don't have a clear third down back, I might just bring Hasty on. I also feel, though, when I'm building this out, I say to myself, well, Hasty in the past has been waived. He has cleared waivers in prior years. Maybe he's shown enough now to where he wouldn't, but he seems like a guy where other teams know what's out there. They had their previous chance to bring him aboard, didn't take it, whereas Jordan Mason is an unproven commodity. But to your point, he's going against 3rd and 4th string guys. When we look at statuses changed by their performances, I think we're in alignment on all of the low-end guys can somehow influence whether they get onto the 53-man roster. When you look at other teams out there like the Jets or Miami, anyone out there who's running a similar system, when the 49ers do cut down, assuming they cut 1 or 2 of the backs that we've been talking about, just gut instinct, does your gut say that those players will be claimed, or do you think they clear waivers? Let's say that it's, you know, Jermichael Hasty and Jordan Mason. You think they both clear waivers?
I think there's a high chance that they do both clear. Like, I mean, it's really tough to pick up a guy. Like they picked up Gallman and then Gallman didn't even play. Like, I mean, yeah, they picked him up and then he wasn't a factor on one of the worst teams in football. And so like, it's going to be really tough to bring in a guy and say, hey, he's going to be our guy and we need a 53-man spot for him as a running back when other guys who are just at his level are going to be around. I think Hasty, the fact that he got so much playtime in the playoffs on national television might change his future to the fact that, hey,
that's a fair point.
He could be a 4th down. He could be our 4th running back. He could be a change of pace guy. Right now in camp, he's returning kicks. Like he's showing a lot of, you know, accoutrement, so to speak, to his resume. And maybe that's a chance that we take him as our 4th running back. But It's just tough. Like running backs are a dime a dozen. No offense to them. Like they're a dime a dozen. Like I think if I remember correctly, based on my scouting last year in college football, I think it was over 40 with 1,000 yards rushing. So like, it's not like they can't find these guys. It's not like every team doesn't have these guys. And I'm not like, batting down Mason's play so far.
Sure.
It's been fantastic because, right, ultimately, we've talked about this. You're only given the opportunities from the coach that you're given, and it's your job to capitalize on those. And he's capitalized on them to the best of his ability. But
yeah, absolutely.
Where does that line up to the rest of the league? I don't know.
Right. We're not watching the fourth quarter of all the preseason games. We are just watching the fourth quarter of the 49ers games. And so if we look at that, hey, there are 3 backs that we're sort of deciding between. Maybe the 49ers keep one, maybe they keep 2. Yes, there's a chance that they get claimed if they're cut. There's a lot of running back hungry teams out there. There's a lot of teams out there that run similar systems to what Shanahan is running in San Francisco and know that the 49ers are great at scouting running backs. And so maybe looking at that waiver wire. In keeping that in mind, in thinking of players that could be poached, would you, if you were in charge of the 49ers front office, consider keeping 5 running backs plus juice?
No.
You're capping that at 4, risking the cuts?
Yeah, risk the cuts because there's so much more important positions out there. Yes, the Niners get injuries all the time, but like they have other guys that are able to step in. You're able to bring in other people off the street. Like it just, for me, there's so many more important positions of need that the team is invested in, and I think is more important than running back, that I think that they need to keep it at 4 plus juice. I mean, I don't know. That's just my opinion. I mean, taking 5 running backs is just asinine because everybody's saying like that. You think about, me included, like why did they take Ty Davis Price in the 3rd? Like they can find value later on. They can find value in undrafted guys. Like, okay, if we get injuries during the season, there's plenty of undrafted guys that are still in game shape that can be picked up and signed and plugged in. Like, will they do as good a job as Eli Mitchell? No, but like you're not expecting all 4 running backs to get injured every single season.
No, you are not. But I would say that with the 49ers expending the assets they have on bringing in running backs, to me, it does send a message. And when I explore the idea of keeping 5 backs, I do admit that I think it is unlikely, but I will say possible, maybe not probable. So when I make my 53-man, I'm going to debate this further. But when I tried to come up with, well, what's another position specifically on offense where the 49ers could go a little bit lighter than I anticipate they will in order to make room for that 5th running back? I think it's possible that the 49ers don't view Malik Turner as that 6th wide receiver, that they just start with 5 wide receivers and hope that if they need to bring him back for his special teams prowess, they could do so later in the year. He was signed almost a month into free agency. He does have guarantees on his $1.1 million 1-year deal, but it's just $300K of it. And so because he's got 3+ years of NFL experience, his practice squad pay would be about $250,000 anyways. And so it offsets most of that $300K. If he's elevated for a single game, it would offset all of those guarantees. I could see the 49ers going a route like that because of what they've shown. They've invested into running backs because of the injuries in recent years and just not seeing a whole lot from that 6th wide receiver position aside from the special teams value, but believing the 49ers went out and added a ton of assets on special teams to begin. So to me, that is going to be something to watch, whether the Niners do consider 5 running backs and whether they go 5 or 6 wide receivers. Fascinating to keep our eyes on that.
True that.
Dirk Pippen coming in. I had to bring this in. Sorry. Malik had that bad penalty last game. Shenny wrote that down. You could see the camera panning over to Shanahan. He's like, no, that's it. Freaking Malik Turner out of here. Telling you.
Special teams are the way for people to get on this roster. I tell you that.
It is. That is another thing that, absolutely keep your eye on Malik Turner this game coming up for special teams. We'll be talking about what to watch for. Special teams is absolutely on my list.
And I'm not jotting down every single special team snap for every single person all preseason.
No.
I'm just going to trust that the Niners got that stuff statted away better than I do.
But more importantly, if I'm penalized throughout the show, I do need you to mark that down so that we can grade my performances afterwards. Let's get into the quarterback room. This one is one that keeps coming up and at first felt like a very simple answer. and seems to get a little bit more complicated the further we go along. So, question to you here, Randon, is do the 49ers seriously consider carrying 3 quarterbacks as they did in the CJ Beathard, Nick Mullins era?
It was dumb then. It would be dumb now. Like, sure, Purdy's doing great. For his time in the league, Sudfeld is doing fine. But there was a reason he was Mr. Irrelevant. Like, isn't there going to be another 10, 15 quarterbacks that are like coming out next year? Like, if somebody snipes Brock Purdy, you could be like, okay, you put him on as your backup. Like, he's going to have to be the backup.
Right.
Or they're going to have to take the same decision we are and have him as the third, because he thinks that, like me, Brock Purdy doesn't scream NFL starter, and you don't want him to be. You want Trey Lance to be. So, like,
right.
Is he really that important to be a backup on your team to where you need to keep 3 because you paid Nate Sudfeld a couple million? Are you really going to put that couple million in the can because you're not going to keep 3? Like, I just think it's so dumb. Like, if somebody snipes Purdy, so be it. We'll draft another one next year. You watched the Patriots draft Mac Jones. They drafted another quarterback this year to be the backup. There's going to be plenty of quarterbacks that are backup capable in rounds 4 through 7 every single draft. It's not going to be a big deal if Purdy gets picked up. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's shown well. I think he's perfect for our system. So, like, yeah, those are a lot of good things. But again, like, he's Mr. Irrelevant for a reason. Like, some team is going to have to say, hey, he proved so much in the 3 preseason games. We want him on the 53. He's going to be our backup. Give him the money. Let's go. Like, yeah. How many teams out there are going to be thinking that way?
I'm with you. In order for the 49ers to carry him, I feel like he would have to be the backup quarterback. And that's just not where Brock Purdy is right now. He is a year project away from being a backup quarterback. And so when I look at him, like, what's the advantage of keeping him around? Well, you're going to try and maintain him through his rookie deal of 4 years. The first year, he's not going to be your backup quarterback. If he progresses, he might be your backup next season. And then you've got him for 3 years. Like, best case scenario, he gets into a couple of games, he flashes something, and you're able to trade him before he gets around to that second contract. But what value are you really getting out of him versus one of those players at the end of this roster that could genuinely contribute? And I go back to this idea that you've pointed out as well, Randon. All these other teams that might come in and grab Brock Purdy are highly unlikely to be using him as their second quarterback on the roster, right? He doesn't know their system, hasn't been in camp. He would clearly be the third quarterback on their team as well. How many teams within the NFL are actually carrying 3 quarterbacks? I had Rohan on the program on Monday. He looked back at last year, and the trend was just 9 teams in the NFL. And those are typically players that they were high on, right? That they went out and drafted and brought into the building and developed. No one drafted Mr. Irrelevant. He got to the last pick in the NFL draft, and the 49ers selected him there. And so, it has been a great story. I would love for Purdy to clear waivers, make it onto the practice squad, and continue to progress. He seems like a great backup quarterback potential, and has shown some things in this preseason. He made PFF's rookie quarterback ranking as second behind only Kenny Pickett in the highest graded rookie quarterbacks. Kenny Pickett with a 74.5 quarterback rating, and Brock Purdy with 74.1, ahead of Skylar Thompson and Desmond Ridder there. So, yes, he has flashed something. I would like it if the 49ers could keep him on the practice squad. Does not feel worth keeping him on the 53-man roster and foregoing some other player like one of the running backs we were just talking about.
My thought process is that the only way you do this, not 3-man, but the only way you cut Sudfeld is for money. And obviously his contract is guaranteed. That's fine. But I'm talking about money in the future. Like, if you believe Purdy will get more benefit taking backup reps all season, and then he can be the backup for the next 3 years, and you really believe that he's a quality backup, how much better could you do than a guy making $870, $985, and $1.1 million when you're trying to build an epic Super Bowl roster around your rookie, or around Trey Lance's contract, right? Around a rookie contract. So you're essentially having 2 rookie deals at QB, and you can spend all that money elsewhere. Like, not saying that Sudfeld is making a lot, but 2.5 million is 2.5 million, right? So like they could literally be like, okay, we believe that we're going to take the gamble that Trey Lance is going to be healthy all year, that Purdy is going to blossom as the second quarterback, getting those reps, running the practice squad all season, doing that kind of thing. Like, he's going to be ready to go, and we can trust him to win a game or two if there's a small injury. But the salary is going to be the most efficient, with Ayuk probably needing a contract, Bosa needing a contract, maybe Mosley needed a contract, and they need to pinch every penny possible on that salary cap.
And that's why the ideal scenario is that he makes it onto the practice squad this year, and you're able to do the same thing, right? You're not wasting that roster spot, and then he's back able to step in as that backup quarterback. Because I think you're right. As we continue to build this out, as we pay Nick Bosa after he has his 20-plus sack season this year, we are going to be cash strapped. And so, yeah, we're going to need to get cheap at positions, and having a backup quarterback on a rookie contract, especially if it is Mr. Irrelevant, it doesn't get much more of a bargain than that. All right, let's transition a little bit from this topic of quarterbacks to the defensive line, going to a position of strength. We want to talk about
filthiness.
Filthy. We want to talk about this defensive line in comparison to 2019. Now, I'm with Jim Harbaugh a little bit in that comparing things is flawed. You end up disparaging one or both of the things that you're comparing. So set that aside. This is not going to be a perfect comparison, but we do want to hint at this idea that this line has the potential to be as good or better than 2019. So the way in which I wanted to break this down is by comparing the starting units versus comparing depth. So Randon, when we look at the starting units, let's take for the 2019 unit, let's say Bosa, Buckner, Armstead, and D Ford as the starting unit, even though obviously Ford did not play the majority of the games that year, played about half, if I remember correctly, and then played in the postseason as well. That compared to Bosa, Javon Kinlaw, Eric Armstead, and I'm going to call it a semi-combination of Samson Ebukam and Drake Jackson, but really it's Samson Ebukam there. I'm just saying that because I believe by the end of this season, you're going to see Drake Jackson as a third down pass rush specialist, and I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. But let's keep it as Bosa, Kinlaw, Armstead, Samson Ebukam versus Bosa, Buckner, Armstead, and Ford. When you look at those, which one jumps out as the better unit?
At their peak, it's got to be in 2019, right? I mean, DeForest Buckner, right before he made 20-something million. Armstead, we were saying, hey, he should have been playing inside the whole time. Well, D Ford forced him inside. And then D Ford was a beast when he was on the field. Like, that defensive line was great. I mean, you got Nick Bosa, and everybody thinks of Nick Bosa now, but you remember that's rookie year. It was a good rookie season, a phenomenal rookie season. But I don't think it's going to hold a candle to the season he's about to have. Right. And so it's premonition versus something that's already happened. And so do you believe that Armstead's going to be a better interior rusher with a full season there? Do you believe that Jadeveon Kinlaw will be able to be serviceable enough to not like cower in the shadow of DeForest Buckner? And then do you believe that the combination of Samson Ebukam and Drake Jackson playing a full season will be better than the spot starting that we got from D Ford? And that's really what it comes down to. And what do you believe in that aspect?
This one is fascinating to me. I think it has the potential to be a wash. It has the potential when talking about this year's unproven unit. I don't think it has the potential to be, I would hesitate to say it would be better. I would be very hesitant. But if I compare them directly to one another, I think Bosa this year will be better than Bosa of 2019. I think Buckner, no question, better than Javon Kinlaw. I think Armstead in 2019 has now taken steps forward. So Armstead of 2022, better than Armstead of 2019. And when I look at the potential production of Ebukam and Drake Jackson versus Ford being injured throughout 2019, I think that has the potential to be a wash there as well. So I look at two spots improved along that defensive line, one lessened and another a wash. Again, I still, because of that difference as of right now between what DeForest Buckner put on tape in 2019 and what we've seen from Javon Kinlaw, that delta, that difference is big enough for me to say this is at best a wash for the 2022 season. And And that sets up the key for this defensive line is comparing the depth of the defensive line in 2019 versus the depth of this team. So
let's before we go away from the starters,
yeah,
would you say over under 6.5 sacks for Ebukam and Drake Jackson?
Over, for sure. Over. I think.
Dee Ford only had 6.5 sacks in 11 games.
Yeah.
So if we're saying healthy between those two guys, do you think they get over 6.5? And you do. So Nick Bosa is going to be better.
Like I almost believe 14 sacks between those two.
So Nick Bosa is going to be better. Armstead's going to be better in the interior. The only thing that's hinging on this really is what Jadeveon Kinlaw are we getting? Are we getting the injured within 1 week and he has to get another surgery and then we're just plugging random fellows into the interior? Or are we going to get the guy that like blew up the interior of the Vikings offensive line? If we get the latter and it's on a semi-consistent basis, 2022 could be legit better than 19.
Yes. I mean, where I get concerned is, and we'll touch on this later because I want to talk about rushing the passer versus stopping the run, especially once we've gotten through that depth. But that's where, to me, the question mark is, right? I mean, I know that this group is going to rack up sacks this season. I have predicted that they take home the sack title, that they rack up 57 sacks for this team, and I do think that they outperform 2019. The question will be, for me, is can they maintain their stoutness against the run on their way to racking up all of those sacks? And in order to really suss that out, we got to look at that depth. So let's talk about the idea, first and foremost, that the 49ers might keep 11 defensive linemen. And if they did so, they might still have to cut someone who would eagerly get swooped up in the waiver system. That's totally wild to me, that you might keep 11 guys and cut someone that still gets swooped up by another team. That is how deep this unit absolutely is. Here's the two different rosters. 2019, there were some good names here. Ronnie Blair. You want to win? Put Ronnie Blair in. That was the 2019 slogan. Julian Taylor, DJ Jones, backup player on that 2019 squad. Solomon Thomas, Sheldon Day, Kentavious Street, Kevin Givens, DeMontre Moore, and Anthony Zettel. At the end there, obviously, just fewer games there on those backups. 2022, Drake Jackson, Charles Omenihu, Kevin Givens, Hassan Ridgeway, Kerry Hyder, Kimoko Toure, Jordan Willis, Alex Barrett, and Kalia Davis. A few other names that I did not include there. I put those that I feel are likely to make this roster or are on the potential bubble there. When you look at that comparison of those two units, what jumps out to you, Randon?
I think we have to, in this argument, we have to assume health, right? So assume health in projecting, right? I think the 2022 squad is deeper on the edge for sure.
Yes.
Where I
agree.
Where you look at the 2019, you like I said, you have DJ Moore or DJ Jones, and then you have Blair combined for 5 sacks. They had, they averaged, 10 games on the roster playing football, and they were a lot younger then. Like obviously they weren't the prime DJ Jones that got him that. Well, I think he made $8 million this year contract. But I think the center is there. And obviously, I'm not scouting the Hassan Ridgeways of the world during training camp, but it really just stems on health. And assuming Jadeveon Kinlaw is healthy all season, I think the total depth of the defensive line is going to be way deeper this season, especially on the edge, to where we should, and like you predicted, lead the league in sacks, which the 2019 team did not.
I absolutely believe that's going to be the case. I want to bring in Chris Royal, super chat here. We appreciate the super chats coming in to say another factor to consider. 22 Ryans is better than 19 Saleh. 22 should be fire. I am excited to see what DeMeco Ryans can do this year. No doubt about it. Nothing disparaging against Robert Saleh in my book, but I am very excited.
That defense was number 2 in the league.
By DeMeco Ryans. Yes, phenomenal defense. 2019 was nothing to sneeze at. I mean, that was a magical season, and Saleh seemed to pull most of the correct levers especially throughout the regular season.
I think where the edge might be is secondary. The secondary is
Yes,
going to
that
be
is
better.
a fair point.
I would take a prime Emmanuel Mosley and Tre'Davious Ward over an old Richard Sherman in any day.
Me too. Even though I've not seen enough yet to definitively say so, on paper, I'm with you on that. By the way, I got a couple of comments.
We're predicting. Here.
Predictions. That's what happens. You got to make a prediction without facts in front of you. That's the nature of predicting. Zachary Couch coming in. First off, he's correct in saying, Rob, the forever optimist, no doubt about it. But then later, he comes back in to say, Rob, should be a rule every time DJ Jones is mentioned, you have to show the sauce. That's a fact. The DJ Jones sauce has to make an appearance every time. DJ Jones.
Has he come out with a Denver flavor yet?
I don't know, but I'm not buying it. I've still got expired bottles of this stuff here. I'm holding on to it as keepsakes. That's it. I'm ignoring the fact that he plays for Denver now. I'm just ignoring that. So here we are, having just listed out the backups for both. To me, what I see when I look at those names, right? You talk about the edge rushers for 2022, Drake Jackson, Charles Omenihu, who's going to slide inside and rush much like Arden Key did last year. Even on the interior, a guy like Kevin Givens with his fast get off, maybe going to produce a couple of sacks for the Niners. Kerry Hyder obviously led the team in sacks in 2020. Kimoko Toure flashed incredible things with Indianapolis when healthy. Jordan Willis saw what he did in contributing on special teams in the playoffs. So a ton of talent there, especially in getting after the passer. But when I look at guys like Ronald Blair, Julian Taylor, DJ Jones, and Solomon Thomas and Sheldon Day, and even Contavious Streets, what I think of with that group is, man, they were phenomenal against the run, right? That group was good at run defense. DJ Jones.
Didn't we not allow a touchdown until like week 12 on the ground?
Right. I mean, it was pretty remarkable what was happening there. DJ Jones was a backup on the 2019 roster. I mean, we were clamoring to get him back as a starter on the 2022 roster. So, Solomon Thomas, he got a lot of flack for where he was drafted, but extremely stout against the run. That's my only area of moderate concern for this unit, is that they might get gouged by the run, and then it becomes hard to be a top defense. If you cannot stop the run when you need to, it's hard to get off of the field.
Yeah, although the linebacking core is probably deeper than it was in 19. So
great call out. That's why I throw it over to you, Randon. That's why I throw it to you. Jaguayo56, sneakerhead here on the channel, coming in to say, Rob, one of the reasons we lost the Super Bowl is D-line, no depth. I will say this. I feel like I think Ronnie Blair was out by that point. I want to say DJ Jones, maybe he had come back. Yes, the depth had been tested at that point. We had a few injuries that caught up with us in 2019. I do believe that had we that depth back in the Super Bowl, we could have closed out that game. Ugh, that is painful to think about. I do agree with Tom Bragg as well. Want to get your opinion on this, Randon. This is the best defense and best team that we have had since 1994. That is a bold statement considering some of the teams in the Harbaugh era, but I think I agree with it. Again, it's on paper. Again, we got to see it actually turn into something on the field, but I think on paper, I agree. This is the most talented defense and most talented team I've seen since 1994.
I was 7, so I have no idea, but I think the defense is sound in every position. Like, you have all pros at every single level. You have the potential for the Niners to have 3 1,000-yard pass catchers, meaning George Kittle, Ayuk, and Debo. It really is just going to stem, if this is the best Niner team since 1994, on the quarterback play. It really is. And, that's just plain. That's all prediction. I mean, as much as anybody can like Trey Lance, it's straight prediction. It's, you don't see many 50 touchdown second seasons in the NFL. And it's all going to be up to him. I've been saying that nonstop on how far this team goes and how well the team can play. Because if he struggles and the offense struggles, this defense could be the best defense of all time. And if they're on the field all the time, they're going to get waxed in the third and fourth quarter because they're going to be puffing for air. So, yeah.
And a very interesting thing to consider is what you hint at right there. And Quesadilla Thrilla, sneakerhead here on the channel, brings in here. Rob, the Super Bowl year, Jimmy was throwing tons of picks in camp. This year, same thing, tons of interceptions, but with Trey. Will this translate to the field for the defense? It was a special unit in 2019. It should be a special unit in 2022, but this is what has to be monitored, right? Is Trey going to be slightly inconsistent, as one might expect, a second-year quarterback with very few repetitions under his belt? Or is it that this defense is just so phenomenal that they would have been picking off anybody in practice, and they're going to continue grabbing those interceptions once we get into the regular season? Going to be fascinating to watch. I will say this. I would argue that as long as Trey is able to limit his turnovers, that if this defense continues to play the way we have seen in the preseason, continues to turn the ball over at the rate they have in the preseason, I think this defense alone could carry us into the playoffs.
So if you were to guess how much more turnovers they had in 19 versus last year, and both teams that went far, what would you say? Turnover differential.
Last year was...
So last year, I'll give you a hit. So last year was -4.
Yeah, with 24 turnovers, right? I think they forced 24.
No, last year they forced
or 24 20. Interceptions. 20. I may be thinking
they had 20 total turnovers last season.
Oh wow!
And they were -4 in the differential. Where would you think the 19 team was based on that?
We were wildly positive through the first. We had the 5 turnover game against the Steelers early on, but I think we were wildly positive in the turnover differential early. So I'm going to say that we were +6 at the end of the year.
Pretty close, +4. So 8 differential is a pretty big difference over.
Huge.
It's pretty much every other game, another turnover going in our direction. And so, coming in that type of talk, Trey Lance is going to take his lumps. It really is. And then you also have a lot of young running backs that haven't really carried a lot of pub. If you're predicting Eli Mitchell to play 17 games, that's a very bold prediction. And then you're going to have to rely on TDP and Sermon or whoever else. You get these young players to carry the rock in high volume situations and in big game situations. And so I think there might be a lot of turnovers, but the fact that this defense in camp has, I believe, over 25 turnovers total as a team, it really warms my heart as a guy who loves defense, just because the fact that the team was abysmal last season in turning the ball over for most of the season until the late part of the year. And that really just set us back because it relies so much on playing the bend but don't break type of defense. You're not turning the ball over and giving yourself a puff. It really just, you have to be on the field for the whole drive and really try to focus on 3 and outs. And that's not as easy as getting a pick and going down and taking your helmet off and taking a swig of Gatorade.
I also want to point out that I'm in agreement with John B., Sneakerhead here on the channel, as to why the 49ers might have success this year in that turnover differential as compared to what we have seen so far in the preseason. John B. coming in to say, Rob, Trey in practice is trying stuff to see what works. Plus, Kyle has him work on things. Trey in the game will be more conservative with the football and keep the ball out of harm's way. That is the hope. The hope is what we saw at North Dakota State continues on in the NFL, that Trey is able to minimize the number of turnovers, that he can play a bit more conservative, lean on the fact that this is an elite defense, a good special teams, solid run game. All of those other factors should play into Trey's ability to take what a defense is giving him and not have to force things, so to speak.
Yeah, I would agree with that to an extent, but I also think that Jimmy G only played, 8 games or 7 games before coming into the 2019 season because of his injury. They were still installing things. The offensive weapons around him were a lot better. And so in 19 versus when he came on the team in 17. So it's not like the Niners weren't installing stuff and having him work on things during camp. They weren't a well-oiled machine. You don't see Jimmy G taking 2 weeks off to go do whatever like Tom Brady did. Teams are working on stuff, and same thing with Jimmy G. I think the only difference is Trey. They're installing a full new offense, and John B is 100% correct in that. They're running the triple option. They're doing all these kinds of stuff, and it's a full new playbook, right? Jimmy G doesn't even have a playbook this season. That's how new it is. It's not even any of the same stuff. So it's 100% correct, John B. That, yeah, they're working on things, and I'm fine with working it. We talked about this the whole time. I'm so sick of practice effing stats. I've never seen this before in my entire life. Like that's what
Yeah,
practice
until
is
last
for,
season.
is working on it. I remember I was a pitcher and I played college baseball. All spring training, I worked on, hey, maybe this different grip for my slider, or maybe this different grip for my changeup, or maybe my two seam isn't really working. What if I move this around, or move my arm angle, or do this, or pause a little bit longer, or hold my hands in a different spot in my stretch? Same thing with batting. Like it's so different in spring training. That's where they work on things. 100% is what John B is saying. That's where they work on things. I don't think they're going to be conservative in the game. I think they're going to game plan for what is going to work on that defense, install that, and execute that. Right now, they're just trying to see all kinds of things and what's working. And, a big thing that I've heard multiple pre-defensive players say in podcasts, that when you go against your own team for so much, you know what they're trying to do. And so you know how to play defense. You don't want to get burnt in camp either as a defenseman. So you're sitting on plays because you know what they're trying to work on, where that's not going to be the case in a real game.
Yeah, I think that's fair to point out there. By the way, Joey Mellons coming in here with a little play on the Jimmy G. Trey Lance feels great, baby. Yes, it does. It's going to feel even better once we get out there, once we start winning. Agree with Jaguayo 56 here, sneakerhead on the channel as well. Coming in to say, Rob, important for Trey to limit those mistakes. If we can control the ball, that will keep the defense fresh. Yes, it will. That in combination with those waves of defensive linemen coming in, totally fresh. All right, let's talk a little bit about this game coming up tomorrow and talk a little bit about the starters and how long we suspect they will play tomorrow when they're out there. So Houston is geared up for this game. They have been, Lovie Smith quoted as saying, this is the game we've kind of been shooting for to play the guys. He said this last week. Not going to say exactly how long right now, but a lot more. So I think you're probably looking at a scenario where the Houston Texans have their starters out there for most of, if not the entirety of the first half. Then you hear the 49ers, Coach Kyle Shanahan saying Tuesday that Lance would play at a maximum up to halftime. In an interview out today, Shanahan mentioned playing the starters about 2 series, which would be shorter than the half, a little bit closer to what they played against Green Bay. When you think about, Randon, whether starters should be playing the entirety of the first half, the first quarter, or how long they should be out there, what do you view as the advantage versus the risk at this point?
It depends on what starters. Nick Bosa should be in a lawn chair. Like he's ready. He's ready to go. Trent Williams.
Let that man show off his quads on the sideline.
Yeah, let's get him in a swimsuit and one of those tanning things that you see. Like that's literally what it needs to be. Same thing with Trent Williams. But you look at some guys, like I think Deebo Samuel could use a couple series. I think IU could use a couple series. I think Jeff Wilson hasn't played at all. So like that could be great. Obviously, Trey Lance needs the reps. You're going to see probably both of the rookie guards play the whole half. The center probably as well, and Brendel, and maybe they do a quarter each, each of the centers that have been taking first team reps. So there's going to be guys that are going to be playing there quite a bit. We've seen Poe take some reps in camp at left guard. Maybe he gets some rotation in there. So I think there's going to be a lot to prove for some of the starters. But like the pinnacle guys that you're talking about, Trent Williams, maybe the top 1 or 2 player in the entire league, like let him be in shorts and he'll be fine for Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree that that's what they should do. From what I'm reading and hearing, Trent Williams and all the starters are expected to make an appearance, but I do believe that they will make a much shorter appearance than many of the other starters out there. I think you're spot on in saying that both of the young guards should be out there for long runs. Getting them reps at this point feels like the priority. And I think for the vast majority of the offense, I mean, you touched on Deebo Samuel. I agree. I think he needs a few reps out there, but I would view him in the class of Trent Williams, that get him out there, get him a few quality reps, and then get him onto the sidelines and take that helmet off and make sure he's healthy for the regular season, because you know what he can do. He does need to get up to speed. He does need to dust off that rust, but you absolutely cannot afford an injury at that position. So I assume that we'll see far more from some of the backup running backs. Obviously, Elijah Mitchell not playing, so you're going to see all backup running backs. But as far as the wide receivers, I would expect more Ray McLeod, Danny Gray, as we've been seeing, less Deebo, less Brandon Ayuk. Although I would hope to see them out there in that first series to get a glimpse of what the entire offense looks like in its totality. And then I would expect it to see a lot of rotation along that defensive line, getting a lot of guys in there, keeping them fresh, getting after the Houston quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think the offense, if they go down and mow down the field, Ayuk gets a couple catches, Debo gets a catch, maybe a trick play, Kittle's doing that kind of stuff. Okay, hey, our offense looks great. Like, let's just pop them out. If they go 3 and out, then you're going to see them probably play another series or two just to kind of maybe get some positive reps in the right direction. As far as the defense goes, I'm on the same boat for both Charvarius Ward, who is just coming back, and Mosley. Like, hey, just be ready for week 1. Like, that's all I really need. Like, these soft tissue injuries are scary for me. And it's like, there's no need for them to be out one series. Like,
yeah,
you saw how locked down they were. Like, both guys have had, I think, over 5 picks in camp. Like, they're ready to go. Like, so, and what are they really going to learn against the Texans wide receivers? No offense. I mean, I guess
no offense, but
outside of Brennan Cooks, which he's like probably the most underrated wide receiver in the NFL. Outside of him, like, who are you really trying to cut your chops against? Like,
right.
So
I agree. I think Charvarius Ward is not going to be healthy for that one. And Emmanuel Mosley, I would probably defer towards keeping him on the sideline, to your point, assuring that there isn't a recurrence of a soft tissue injury. But he was lights out at practice, so he may be a full go. We shall see. A couple of super chats that I do want to bring in before we finish this conversation about the starters in tomorrow's game. Chris Royal coming in with the super chat, sneakerhead here on the channel, saying, ultimately, I think this defense is better than the 2019 team. However, it'll be very difficult to finish in the top 2 because of the AFC West games. That's a great point, that statistically speaking, we're coming up against a buzzsaw this year in the teams that we're facing. And so, again, statistically speaking, when you get to the end of the season, will that reflect on being a top level defense? I still think it allows us to get that sack title, which is my prediction for this defense being super special. 57 sacks on the year, that official prediction. What do you think, Randon?
The sacks are going to be there because you look at Mahomes is one of the top leaders in interceptions every year. Russell Wilson's one of the top leaders in sacks every season. Like, they like to extend the play, and the defensive line can get after it. Every single year, there's a disappointment somewhere. And it feels like the AFC West that's been geared up to be the best division, including me. Like, feels like there's going to be a disappointment somewhere. I mean, you look at the LA Chargers defense was pretty garbage last season. I believe against the run, not the pass. But like, you're like, okay, if San Francisco can run all over them and limit Herbert's options, does the defense look great because the options are limited? Is the offense in Kansas City that much better without Tyreek Hill? I mean, Travis Kelce is 35, so Father Time is undefeated, and then you're relying on Juju and a couple rookies and MVS who got paid for absolutely nothing that he did in Green Bay. Like, there's a lot of what ifs there that could go wrong in the AFC West to where the Niners, like, a couple of people are predicting the thing could sweep that division. I don't plan on that.
Yeah.
But you look at the possibility and where the dice roll, like, it could happen because there's been crazier things in the NFL. Nobody predicted Cincinnati last season, and you could have some of that kind of mojo going in, and then positively for the Niners or negatively for some of those teams that we're going to be playing.
Yeah, absolutely. Giving credit to John B for that mega prediction, as he's calling it. The 49ers sweep the AFC West. I don't care how good the quarterbacks are in that division. 49ers take them all in close games. If that happens, you heard John B calling it here first. Chris Royal coming back in to clarify that he thinks it'll be very difficult to finish in the top 2 in that last super chat. Coming back in to clarify, he does think it's possible to finish in that top 1 to 2, though. This defense is special enough to do so, even though they come up against the AFC West. And we have Jaguayo56 with the super chat coming in to ask, Rob, is it a real possibility for Poe to start? My official answer here is no. At this point in time, it is not. I think that is Aaron Banks' job to lose, but Poe absolutely is fighting for a roster spot, and I think at this point in time is more likely to make the roster than to find himself cut at that 53-man cut down.
Possibility to start when? Week 1 or week 14?
Fair clarification.
Right? Because week 1, I think you're 100% correct. I think it's Banks' job. Like, that you want to give the second round pick as much runway as possible. But hey, by that gauntlet stretch in the middle of the year, and he's not doing well against some tough opponents, especially since we play the Rams and Aaron Donald twice, I think within the first 10 weeks, you could see them giving some other people some play during practice. I mean, Trent Williams is pumping everybody's tires in camp, but he says he's got that dog in him. So, I like it. I mean, you look at it, and I was listening to a couple other podcasts, and it's like, I don't really know how he's winning. Like, he shouldn't be winning, right? He's 6 foot. He's not like, he doesn't have very long arms. Yeah, he's over 300 pounds, but it's like, but he motors like his cone and he that 40. And I don't know what it is about 40 times in the 3 cone for offensive linemen, but they tend to do phenomenal in zone schemes because of the athleticism. And Poe, we were talking about, hey, keep him on the roster as a backup fullback. Like,
right.
Like next season, Juice is making $8 million. Like, are we going to be talking about Poe, the refrigerator fullback, coming in next season? Like this, like that's how athletic this kid is. Like some guard swing action passes, like he's marked eligible on the field, like all that kind of stuff. Like, man, that guy's athletic, and he has every possibility to start towards the end of the season. I just don't see it happening in week 1.
I'm with you on that. That's a great call out, though, that as the season progresses, he could absolutely see the field. I do want to say we called out Brandon Cooks earlier, and Dirk Pippen doing the good deed, calling out that Cooks hails from Stockton. 209 represent. Dirk and I, our old-time friends, met in Stockton at University of the Pacific there. Dirk, a Stockton native. I want to give a shout out to 420 Savage and Archie coming in, doing the solid of talking about hitting that like button. I do ask that if you're here watching it, as many of you are at the moment, smash that like button. And before we get into our last topic that'll take us home for the last 15 or 20 minutes, I want to say that Randon's information for you to follow him on Twitter, subscribe to him on YouTube, to find his Hockey Royalty podcast is all down below in the description of the video. So at the conclusion of this thing, after you've already liked, already subscribed, and you're here hitting the notification bell for Randon and I every single Wednesday, go ahead and get down there into that description, head over and subscribe there as well. Let's go ahead and, by the way, Dirk is thrilled to see 209 people watching. The 209 is everywhere at this point. And we got people representing Stockton and Modesto in the comments as well. The 209 Central Valley is here. All right, let's take it to that last topic, Randon. Let's talk about a little bit of what to watch versus the Texans. And I'll kick this one off. I think the first thing that we need to be watching is, do the 49ers mix up the running back carries early on to get a look at the results against similar competition? You hear it continually. Jordan Mason is having the most success, and it is very fair to point out that he is also going against the least capable defenders on the opposing team. So will the 49ers explore that early and often? The current rumor is that Jeff Wilson Jr. is going to get the start there instead of Trey Sermon. Do we see Jeff Wilson Jr., Trey Sermon, and Jordan Mason getting those early snaps, dividing them up, or is it going to be the Jeff Wilson show throughout the entirety? To me, that's going to tell us a lot about their thoughts on the running back room.
I think they should. I mean, I think they should sprinkle them all in, right? Like that's, we talked about ad nauseum in the beginning, like who's going to make this roster? Are they going to keep 5? Like the part of opportunity is equal opportunity, right? Like the opportunity against the same opponents. And so like to really see who's jumping off the page, like I think they should. And that's going to be the one I'm looking at most. Like, as much as people want to hate on Trey Sermon, like there were some runs that he got zero room. Like he was getting tackled in the backfield. So
absolutely,
but he was also showing indecisiveness. And I think, like, how is this going to look against the starters? Is Jeff Wilson starting because the fact that he's already made the roster and they really just want to get him a couple runs and pop him off? Will he get that starter treatment to give us kind of that look into him making the roster as an automatic? So I think that's a possibility to look at for me as well. Is with McGlinchey having a chance to be injured, how does that right tackle spot look? I mean, it's been shaky so far during the preseason. Are they able to weather the storm during the first 4 games and put him on the pup, or are they going to make him play through it semi-injured? at that point.
It's going to be fascinating to watch. I mean, you've got a guy backing him up in Colton McKivitz, who this time last year did not make the 53-man roster, right? But then was brought back and did contribute throughout, going up against the Los Angeles Rams and holding it down at that tackle spot. And so, I would like to see McGlinchey back out there for week one. It seems at best questionable at this point. So it does seem worth monitoring how McKivitz fares out there. Is he going to be able to hold down that right tackle spot? Is he going to be better against the run initially than he is in pass protection? And will the 49ers then have to scheme around that for week one? Thankfully, that week one matchup coming against the Chicago Bears. The next thing that I'm going to be watching is Tayshaun Gibson, right? Being brought in as the veteran safety. I mean, a considerable amount of NFL experience. Jimmy Ward's injury being talked about as reasonably severe. Certainly week one is in question for him. If weeks 1 and 2 fall into question, do they then hold him out of week 3 against Denver because they don't want to put him in for first time at altitude on the road? Does he end up missing a quarter of the season? A lot of that will dictate the move the 49ers need to make, whether they end up putting Jimmy Ward on one of the injury lists and needing to add a fifth safety, right? In bringing Tayshaun Gibson onto the team. I think where he is able to play with what team, whether it's the second team or the third team, or if he sneaks in for a couple of first team snaps, considering when he was brought onto the squad, how little time he's had to learn this defense, if he sneaks into some of those first team reps or gets a lot of the second team reps, I think that could tell us a little something about Jimmy Ward's injury.
At this point, would you want him on the pup?
Would I want Jimmy Ward on the pup?
Not want him. Like, do you think it would be beneficial for the Niners to let him rest another 4 weeks and play him in week 5?
With the way in which the injury has been spoken about to this point, there is a portion of me that thinks maybe shutting him down is the best bet, because those are the types of injuries that if you re-aggravate them once during the season, that's it. You're never recovering fully from it. Yeah, you may play the entire season, but it's going to linger for you. It is going to be something that causes, hampers your ability to perform at your highest. I would rather have Jimmy Ward at his highest for 13 games than have him with a nagging soft tissue injury throughout, the vast majority of the season. So if it is serious enough to hold him out of week 1, I would seriously consider that short-term designation.
I agree with that. I mean, if he's questioned, but it's so hard. I don't know when that decision has to be made. Does the pup have to be made by the 30th? Like whether you're putting him on there for 4 weeks? I know they just did that for Verrett, but
no, actually, yes, that will have to be done by the 30th. They will either be waived or put onto one of the injury designation lists at that point.
I guess they could waive somebody because they just signed that safety. So I guess they could waive him and then, see what Ward is looking like towards the first game and then sign him back or something along those lines.
Yeah. Certainly with a veteran, oftentimes you sign them back after week 1 so that their full year salary isn't guaranteed. So I could see that as a possibility.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. But like I said, I think the major thing for me is what you said was that 13 games at peak Ward is better than 17 of him as a possibility for multiple re-injuries on a soft tissue.
Yeah. And I'm okay. Honestly, Tom Bragg coming in to say which of the two he would prefer to start if it were Odom or Tarvarius Moore. I'm okay with either up against Chicago. I've not seen something clear cut from either George Odom or Tarvarius Moore to claim that spot outright. Certainly Moore's getting burned against Green Bay was painful to watch, but that felt just like a poor snap and not a referendum on Moore's ability. He still seems to possess that speed. It wasn't illustrated on that play, unfortunately, but I'd be okay with either one of them starting against Chicago week 1. I think if it goes beyond that, I would rather have a veteran presence back there opposite of Hufanga. I would rather have Gibson. If it were going to be a 4-game absence, I'd rather have a veteran presence.
That one play, he got burnt, but so did a lot of other players like K'Wan Williams, who everybody loves. So there was another play in the Green Bay game where he played at press man in the slot and he guarded that route perfectly. So it was just one route where he got burnt. And that post corner route from the slot is one of the toughest routes that we've gotten burnt multiple times by Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams and other receivers. And so it's just one of the toughest. This is one of the toughest routes to guard because not only are you in the slot and you have to give space, but the receiver has a two-way go. And so you can't use the sideline for your help. And so it's just one of the harder routes to go there. And they're giving him a lot of leeway in camp, and he has all that athleticism. But the same thing that everybody's saying about running backs who are coming back from an Achilles, like the amount of athleticism you have to do to play defensive back coming off an Achilles right away. I mean, is he really going to have that quick twitch for quite some time or ever? It really remains to be seen. And that's definitely a valid point. But if you're saying, hey, he's not going to ever get that back, not because of that one play. Is what I'm saying.
Right. It is absolutely something to wonder there. And John B coming in with some creative looks at this. And I wouldn't put it past the 49ers to get creative in assembling their 53-man roster. John B saying, Rob, cut more and try Quantrez Knight at free safety behind Odom until Ward comes back. I think we would have seen more looks from Quantrez Knight if they were seriously considering it. But I do want to find ways to keep Quantrez Knight on this team. And when I get down to the 53-man, if I've got to do something like cutting more to make it happen, that just might be what I end up doing because I'm all about the potential on this roster. And I feel like we have definitely scored on some of these younger players that I want to keep around as opposed to some of those that keep coming back year after year. In transitioning in what to watch against the Texans, another thing I'm going to keep my eye on will be any rotation at the left guard spot early on. We said it just a moment ago, so it doesn't need to be repeated. I don't think Poe has a legit shot at claiming that starting role early in the season, but Randon astutely pointed out that could happen later on in the year. And I think if that's a possibility, and if Poe is destined to make this 53-man roster, you might see him getting some of those late first half left guard snaps. But it's also one where you want to maximize the number of snaps for Aaron Banks. So maybe you want to keep him in there the entirety of the first half. Either decision by the 49ers coaching staff will tell me a little something about their plans at the left guard spot.
I'm more excited for Poe in the regular season. I'm just like, I'm dreaming up Madden plays in my head. Like you're having you add an extra offensive lineman, like a dual, like almost a wishbone with Poe and Juice in the backfield. And then you have Trey Lance and Mitchell running some sort of weird triple option play. And then you have Debo coming along the backside. Like you have so many lines that the iPad cannot keep up with how many lines are crisscrossing in the background. Like I just see, like he's such a versatile player. And I think he had to prove that he could play actual football. I mean, meaning actual football, like he could stay at a position and make the roster outside of his gimmicky 300-pound fullback video that he produced. And he's doing that. And now Shannon's like, okay, well, he's not a liability. And now I can light him up for some trick plays during the regular season. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's the fullback in, like they had Trent Williams on the move. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he was the fullback in goal line situations where you're putting another 300-pound body on the field.
I wouldn't either because I would not. Juice is one of those players that I expect to suit up. If all the starters are suiting up, Juice is going to suit. And he probably only plays a series, right? And after that, you need a fullback, and we let go of Hokett. So you got to get creative in who you're putting back there as fullback. Certainly, I would assume we'll see some of the backup tight ends in that move position at fullback. I mean, hell, you might see Jeff Wilson Jr. back there. There could be a lot of different formations, but putting Poe back there is something all Niner faithful want to see.
Do you mind throwing up Pat O's question here?
Pat, yes, I did want to touch on that one. It's funny you bring that up because I was literally thinking of this. Are we overhyping this draft class? I think it's possible. Anytime I'm this optimistic about something, my pessimistic side creeps in and is like, dude, you're a pretty optimistic guy, Rob. Like, are you looking at this through rose-colored glasses? We've not seen any regular season to back it up yet. So I will admit it's too early to crown them anything, but I'm thrilled with what I've seen so far.
I think it's just kind of like oh God, what's the comedian, the gif of the crack addict. It's
Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
And
it's like last season I wanted so much for all the rookies to shine, right? You wanted to see as much Trey Lance film. You want to see Aaron Banks. Hey, we needed offensive line. We drafted Aaron Banks. Great. Oh, we got after the third string or third round running back, and we have all these undrafted guys. So now he's drafted. Kyle Shanahan's putting all his nuts on the table and drafting a guy in the third round, and like this guy's going to be dominant, and like yada 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 all the way down, and then like just all training camp. Besides Trey Lance had the highlight films, like it in this training camp is just completely different. Like you have all these guys balling out. Sam Womack winning the job. Like I'm excited. Are we overhyping them? I don't think overhyping is the thing. I think some people are like, I saw it could have been sarcastic, but somebody in the chat was like, "Yeah, Jordan Mason leading the team in rushing yards." Like, okay, yeah, that's a little bit overhype. Is
that's
Poe
a little,
is Poe gonna be tight end 3? Like, I don't know. Like it's just all this kind of stuff like that. But I'm just excited. I'm excited when the draft class hits early, like, and Drake Jackson's hitting on this pick early. Ty Davis Price has shown some runs. Danny Gray's caught some touchdowns. Burford is starting. You have Samuel Womack starting. You have Purdy doing pretty good for a 7th round pick. Like a lot of these guys are showing out in camp, and that's just excitement. Are we hyping this in the epitome of their entire career? I don't really feel like looking down that far. I'm just excited for what they've shown me, and that makes me happy. That's all I'm worried about.
I'm just happy because you pulled out a Tyrone Biggums reference, which Dave Chappelle a little bit. Hey, can we get some more of those rookies there, man? Let me get some more of those rookie highlights. Come on, man. Yeah, no, it definitely. I mean, I'm thirsting to see these rookies out there on the field putting up the same highlights that we have seen in the preseason. That's absolutely something I'll be watching for. For me, the last piece, I do want to touch on this because I've seen the second time that Alfredo Gutierrez has come up in the chat. Definitely want to hit it. Robert coming in to say, Rob Schuh, do you think Alfredo Gutierrez will get more playing time? I don't. The Niners get that special roster exemption to keep him on the squad because he's an international player. And I have heard positive things, but the number of reps that he's gotten seems so slight to this point. And it feels like a huge stretch for the 49ers to consider keeping him on the 53-man roster, even something like next season, let alone this year. They do get exemptions. I believe they even get an extra exemption if they want to keep him on the practice squad. So I would look for Alfredo Gutierrez to be on the practice squad this year.
I think he might get more playing time in this game if that's what he's referring to.
Yeah, should get some snaps in the fourth quarter for sure. Absolutely should. All right. So, and Quesadilla Thrilla has his opinion. Alfredo would be a good goal line guy. He corrected the go alone guy to goal line. A little autocorrect issue. All right. Last topic for me here on what I'm watching for. If you've got another one, Randon, happy to get that one in here. But the starting lineups for special teams. I'm going to be viewing that, pausing my screen, counting down every player that's out there on special teams, because I think that's going to tell us a little bit about the fringe of this roster. Those players that make the 53-man will need to contribute as special teams players if they're going to be on the edge of this roster. And this game is going to simulate closest to real game action for starters. So I think those that are out there for special teams, that will be a huge signal to who's going to make the tail end of the 53-man.
I 100% agree with you. And we've been talking about it. I mean, Pepper was on, one of the other Niners podcasts talking about like realistically, like I would tell all the rookies to define their first year in the bigs outside of like the top picks on special teams, because that's how you're going to get on the roster. And like the one thing that made me a fan of Talanoa Hufanga said he was going to be the best special teams player on the Niners his first year. That was his goal. Like he had the right mindset, and whether he got that from Troy Polamalu, who he was talking to and getting advice from all offseason, and as well as hair care products, or if it was his own idea, like it really stems in a positive light. And it's hard for those guys, right? Like all these guys that are being drafted were top players on their team. They were probably definitely top players on their high school team and used to being the guy everywhere they go. But when you're a 6th, 7th, or 4th through 7th and an undrafted guy, and you're like, oh, I'm going to ball out and win the job, that rarely, if ever, happens. And the only way you make the roster is if you play on special teams. And I think it's something to be said about that and who's going to be playing special teams when it matters. And I also, this is a side note to the special teams, but I really liked, God, I'm forgetting his name, the special teams coach.
Schneider.
But he was talking about how they practice. And he said he said the whole like 50 yards or 40 yards between the kickoff and when the ball is received is irrelevant. And they really just practice at the catch point for either side, like the initial blocks and practicing at the catch point and shortening the field down 20 yards. And not only is that really like eye-opening, not only for the special teams and how they practice to get the more reps at the highest level of intensity for their play, but that goes to life, like really practicing where it matters. And I think a lot of people can learn something from that, not only on but off the field.
I love what I'm hearing from the special teams players about Brian Schneider. It feels like that unit is poised to take a big step forward. I mean, not much room for regression after the way in which they played last year, unless they just want to step it down and play like the Packers special teams did, but a lot of room for improvement. And I think we're going to see it. Absolutely believe we are going to see it. I want to bring this in from Quesadilla Thrilla before we close this one out. Quesadilla Thrilla asking, says, Rob, when can we expect your 53-man roster? Got to see the game tomorrow. Look for either a promo of that coming out on Friday with the show with Jackhammer or a special edition coming out over the weekend wherein I do my 53-man countdown. By the time Randon and I get back together, it will be the 31st. And so we will be talking about what cuts the 49ers have made, not what cuts they will make. So there was that sweet spot of needing to see the third preseason game before you get into it. So Randon and I couldn't do that 53-man projection just yet, but we'll be talking about those cuts when we come up next week. Randon, I know you have a hockey royalty program coming up this evening. What time is that, and where can the good folks find you at?
Yeah, it's a good thing that we're going after the cuts just because I have 5 fantasy football drafts this weekend and I don't have any time to focus on who's getting cut. My Hockey Royalty podcast comes up in 45 minutes, so 9 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. on the West Coast. We're talking about a lot of things. Who has the most to prove for the Kings? News throughout the Pacific Division, some signings, a new affiliation with the Greenville Swamp Rabbits. Out of the
Swamp Rabbits, you say?
Get your gear for all the Swamp Rabbits. But yeah, it's going to be a good show, and tune in if you guys want to learn a little bit about the LA Kings or just hockey in general.
Absolutely. Everybody wants to know more about hockey because no one knows anything about hockey. Too Far TV is coming in to say, dang, I missed the stream. That's okay. You can go back and rewatch it. It was that good. It was that good. You want to go back. You want to rewatch. For those of you that are still here, please hit that like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel. Randon's information is down below, as I mentioned earlier, in the description of this video. You can subscribe on Twitter. You can subscribe on you. You can follow him on Twitter. You can subscribe on YouTube, and you can find that Hockey Royalty podcast that he was just talking about. The link is down below. I will be back tomorrow. Going to be going on early with the Sneakerhead call-in show at 4 p.m. running up to kickoff. So starting tomorrow at 4 p.m., Sneakerheads can call in. Until then, cheers, faithful.